The haunted house of Myrtles Plantation. There are places in the world that seem stuck in time, condemned to repeat their stories in an endless cycle of mystery and terror. Myrtles Plantation is one of those places. Built in the late 18th century, this imposing mansion, with its sprawling verandas and colonial architecture, is more than just a tourist attraction in rural Louisiana. It carries invisible scars that tell tales of pain, vengeance, and inexplicable apparitions. If you ever felt that inexplicable chill when entering an old place, or if you've ever had the sensation of being watched when no one else was around, then you know what I'm talking about. The difference is that, at Myrtles Plantation, these phenomena aren't just figments of the imagination. There are records, testimonies, evidence that defy logic, accounts from visitors who left convinced they were accompanied by something or someone. But what makes this house so haunted? Why do so many people who visit it feel unexplained chills and witness events that defy any rational explanation? This account, which you're about to read, is different from anything you've ever seen. It's not a cheap horror story, not fiction created a scare. It's a tale that could have been lost in some obscure corner of the internet, shared by someone who saw too much, felt too much, and was never the same again. Arrival at Myrtles Plantation. When I arrived at Myrtles Plantation, the air carried a weight that wasn't just from the suffocating Louisiana humidity. The place seemed caught between two realities, the present and something much older, as if the house itself was aware of its history. The ancient trees with their twisted branches seemed to bend over the gravel path, as if trying to stop me from going further. I knew the plantation had a reputation for being haunted, but reading about it is one thing. Being there, feeling the dense atmosphere hanging in the air, is another. The silence was broken only by the monotonous chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves, like whispers from something invisible. The first thing that caught my attention was a veranda. The wooden structure creaked slightly, even without wind, as if someone was walking there. But there was no one, just a mansion, with its old windows and slightly parted curtains, as if someone was watching me from inside. An irrational dread ran down my spine. It was absurd, I knew that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive, and that it knew I had arrived. Still, I pressed on. The door creaked as it opened, revealing the shadowy interior and the promise of secrets buried for centuries. As soon as I stepped inside, a peculiar smell hit me, a mix of aged wood, melted wax candles, and something else, something sweet but slightly rotten. There was no one at the reception, just a grand hall with its unlit chandeliers and an old mirror, where my reflection seemed a little off. For a second, I thought something moved behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing but the dark hallway stretching ahead. My heart raced. It was just my imagination, right? Just my mind playing tricks. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. The mirror in the main hall. I never really believed in stories about cursed objects. I always thought mirrors were just pieces of glass reflecting reality, nothing more. But there was something deeply wrong with the mirror in the main hall of Myrtles Plantation. It stood right at the entrance, opposite the door, a monstrous frame of gilded, worn with that seemed to suck in light rather than reflect it. I tried to avoid looking at it too much, but the feeling that something moved within the glass was unavoidable. It wasn't my reflection. It was something beyond that. Something that seemed to watch, to wait. It didn't take long for me to hear the rumors. They said that mirror held more than images. It held souls. Stories claimed that after a brutal murder in the house, the mirror was never the same. Looking closely, I saw strange marks on its surface. Like fingerprints? No, not quite. They looked like marks from the inside, as if someone had tried to get out. A shiver ran down my spine when I realized that, for a second, my reflection didn't move with me. It seemed delayed, but it was impossible not to feel that something was wrong. I turned quickly to see if anyone was behind me. Nothing, just the heavy silence of the house, crushing me. I tried to ignore it. I went to the reception, where an elderly woman greeted me with a restrained smile. I asked about the mirror, awkwardly, trying to mask my nervousness. Her expression changed. She became serious, almost cold. "It's best not to look at it too much," she said, lowering her voice. "If you stare too long, you might see something you shouldn't." My stomach churned. I didn't know if she was just feeding the legend to impress visitors or if she truly believed it. But by then, I wasn't so sure it was all just folklore. The room of the girl in the white dress after the uncomfortable conversation about the mirror, I walked through the house's hallways. The creaking of the wood beneath my feet constantly reminded me that I wasn't alone. Even without seeing anyone, I felt presences, invisible shadows that seemed to watch me from afar. Every door seemed to hide a secret, but one in particular caught my attention. It was a small room with an old iron bed and a porcelain doll sitting on the rocking chair beside it. But what made me stop was the story I heard about that place. It was the room of a girl who, they say, never left the house. The mansion staff spoke of nightly apparitions. A girl in a white dress, always standing at the foot of the bed, staring at whoever was sleeping there. Some visitors reported hearing children's laughter echoing through the hallways, even when there were no children in the house. Others claimed to have seen small footprints mysteriously appearing on the polished wooden floor. But what chilled me the most was the account of a tourist who swore they felt a small hand touch their arm in the middle of the night. But when they turned on the light, no one was there. I entered the room, feeling the cold airway on me. It was strange because the other rooms were stuffy, but inside this one, the temperature seemed to drop sharply. My gaze stopped on the porcelain doll, its glass eyes reflecting the faint light from the hallway. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, but another part, the part that ignored fear and sought to understand what was happening, made me stay. The bed was perfectly made, the mirror in the corner dusty, but there was something there that deeply unsettled me. That's when I saw it. At the bottom of the door, a few inches from the floor, was a handprint, small, clear, as if a child had pressed their fingers against the wood from the inside. The footprints in the hallway, that handprint in the girl's room left me uneasy. I knew it could just be an old impression in the wood, a detail overlooked by the staff. But then, something else happened. When I left the room and closed the door behind me, the creaking of the wood in the hallway sounded different. It wasn't the sound of my footsteps. It was two pairs. I stopped immediately, holding my breath, but the steps continued. They were short, light, like a child's. I turned quickly, but the hallway was empty. The silence there was crushing, as if the air itself was watching me. I hesitated for a moment before continuing. Tried to ignore the feeling that someone was walking behind me. But then I looked at the floor. My heart raced. There were footprints there, small, wet, appearing one by one on the polished wooden floor, as if someone invisible was walking right in front of me. The worst part? They were coming toward me. I swallowed hard. There was no one else in the house besides the staff, and a few tourists scattered in the lower rooms. So, where were those footprints coming from? I took a step back, and at that exact moment, a loud crack echoed through the hallway, as if something had fallen inside one of the rooms. I ran to the nearest door and pushed it open. The room was empty, but the rocking chair in the corner swayed slowly, as if someone had just gotten up from it. The chill down my spine made me step back. I could no longer deny it. There was something there with me. The portrait that watches. I was already starting to doubt my own sanity when I went down to the main hall. I needed a moment to catch my breath, to convince myself that all of this was just my mind playing tricks. But then, something even more disturbing happened. At the end of the hallway, hanging on the wall, was an old portrait. The painting showed a woman with a stern expression, dressed in 19th century clothing. Her gaze was deep, penetrating, and even from a distance, it seemed to follow anyone who passed by. I had heard about this painting. They said the woman depicted was a former resident of Myrtles Plantation, and that her spirit still roamed the house. Some people swore they saw the eyes in the portrait blink, or even the mouth move as if trying to whisper something. Others reported that, after staring at it for too long, they began to feel a pressure in their chest, as if being suffocated by an invisible presence. I laughed nervously at these stories, but as I approached, a detail froze me. The painting was slightly blurred, as if it had been touched by something wet. Getting closer, I noticed something even more terrifying. On the lower frame of the painting, there were fingerprints, small and wet, identical to the footprints I had seen upstairs. I instinctively stepped back. A shiver ran up my spine, a suffocating feeling that something was about to happen. Then, a sound froze me in place. A faint whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from inside the painting. It wasn't my imagination. I heard it. Leave. The whisper in the forbidden room, my instincts screamed at me to get out of there, but something held me back. It was as if the house knew I was there and wanted to show me something. I walked quickly to the end of the hallway, trying to ignore the suffocating feeling of being watched. Then, I saw a door that looked different from the others. It was older, the wood worn and the iron latch rusted, as if it hadn't been open in a long time. And then I remembered something. This was a forbidden room. The house staff avoided talking about it, but rumors circulated among visitors. They said this was the room where a tragedy had occurred centuries ago. Some said it was a murder. Others that someone had died there in a terrible way and never moved on. The door was always locked, but at that moment, to my surprise, the handle turned easily. My heart raced. I didn't want to open it, but something told me I had to. I took a deep breath and pushed it slowly. The air inside the room was dense, heavy with a strange smell, like burnt candles mixed with something else metallic. The room was untouched, as if it had been abandoned suddenly. A cracked mirror occupied the far wall, reflecting shadows that weren't there. I took a hesitant step inside, and then I heard it, a faint whisper, coming from a dark corner of the room. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house. It was a voice, low and drawn out, saying something I couldn't understand. But the tone was pure despair. The wrong reflection in the cracked mirror, I was paralyzed. My body refused to move, as if trapped in that suffocating room. The cracked mirror in front of me reflected the dimness of the room, distorting my image into irregular fragments. But something was wrong, very wrong. I looked at myself, trying to control my rapid breathing. And then I realized my reflection wasn't synced with my movements. I slowly raised my right hand. In the glass, my reflection raised the left. I tested another movement, tilting my head to the side. The image did the same, but with a subtle delay, almost imperceptible. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to believe it was just an effect of the crack in the mirror. But then, without me moving a single muscle, the reflection smiled. I stepped back immediately, stumbling backward. The smile in the mirror wasn't mine. It was too wide, artificial, as if something inside was enjoying itself at my expense. The crack on the surface seemed to widen, pulsing like an open wound. The whisper that had come from the corner of the room now seemed to resonate inside the glass, murmuring something incomprehensible. Then, with a sharp crack, like bones breaking, the smile disappeared and my reflection returned to normal. But I knew something inside was watching me, something that knew I was afraid. The night visitor after what happened in the forbidden room. All I wanted was to leave that house. But something held me there, a mix of fascination and dread kept me from simply walking away. I spent the rest of the day avoiding the darker rooms, trying to ignore the whispers and the invisible gazes that followed me. When night fell, I went to my room, hoping that exhaustion would stop my mind from playing tricks on me. I was wrong. The house was quieter than before, as if everything was waiting for something. I lay down, trying to sleep, but a faint sound woke me, a creak, as if someone was walking down the hallway outside. I held my breath and waited. The noise stopped right at my door. For long seconds, everything remained still, and then 3 sharp knocks echoed on the wood. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't move. The knocks repeated, louder this time. I swallowed hard and forced my voice out. Who's there? No answer. The silence that followed was worse than any response. But when I thought it was over, I saw something that froze me under the door crack. A shadow moved, and it didn't look human. The door that opened by itself, I knew I shouldn't move. My entire body screamed at me to pretend nothing was happening, to simply close my eyes and wait until morning. But how could I ignore it? The shadow standing under the door crack seemed to pulse, as if alive. Seconds dragged like hours. Then, without warning, the handle slowly turned. The metallic sound echoed in the room, making my stomach churn. My body stiffened, as if any movement could draw even more attention from that thing. The door opened slowly, creaking as if protesting its own movement. The hallway beyond was just an endless void, a tunnel of darkness so dense it seemed to devour the faint light from the bedside lamp. And then the worst happened. A bare foot emerged from the darkness. Small, fragile, childlike, but something about it was wrong. The skin looked too pale, almost gray, and when the toes moved, the sound it made wasn't a flesh meeting wood. It was dry, as if they were broken. My lungs seemed incapable of drawing air. The rest of the figure was still hidden in the hallway, but I knew that if I waited one more second, I would see its face. And something inside me said that if that happened, I would never be the same. The last glance, I couldn't stay there. I couldn't wait to see whatever was hiding in that darkness. But my body wouldn't move. The child's foot took another step into the room, and a strong smell of damp earth filled the air, as if something was rotting right there in front of me. My heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo through the entire room. And then, finally, I saw it. The figure stepped out of the shadow. It was a girl, or at least something that had once been a girl. The white dress was dirty, stained with something dark and dry. The thin arms hung limply at her sides, but it was a face that made me want to scream. The skin was translucent, like old paper, and the eyes were wrong. Black, deep, empty, a void where life should have been. But the worst was the smile. That too wide smile that didn't seem to belong to a human. I don't know how I found the strength to move, but somehow I did. I jumped out of bed and bolted to the door, trying to pass through it without looking back. But at the last second, something made me turn. The girl was still there, standing in the middle of the room. Her face was tilted to the side, watching me as if analyzing every detail of me. And then her lips moved. There was no sound, but I understood perfectly what she said. "You've seen me. Now I can find you." You never really leave that house. I ran out of the room, racing down the stairs, as if something invisible was about to grab me by the heels. The air in the house felt heavier, as if every wall was alive, pulsing to the rhythm of my own rapid breathing. I no longer cared about the judgmental looks from the staff or the few visitors still wandering the halls. I just wanted to get out, fast. Stepping through the front door should have been a relief. The humid night air enveloped me, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe without that crushing weight on my chest. But something was wrong. The plantation around the house seemed different. The trees, which had seemed to bend with the wind, were motionless. The sky, which had been dark, seemed deeper than normal, like an endless void. Then I saw my reflection in the mansion's window, and I understood. My image in the glass didn't follow me. I was standing outside, but my reflection was still inside the house, watching me from the other side of the door. It smiled, not in a friendly way, not in a human way. It was the same smile I had seen in the cracked mirror, the same smile that girl had shown me before whispering those words. My feet faltered, and absolute terror took over my body. I had left the house, but something told me that, somehow, I would never truly leave.